Howdy, cousin. Now, keep in mind, I have no experience plumbing, so this is all just an idea running through my head. Once I get my homestead situation set up and I'm in the ground and I have my rooms for to live in, okay, I'm gonna need water a couple different ways. So I was thinking I would get anywhere from like a 200-pound propane tank, like used ones, like kind of big, but not the real big ones. You got what I'm saying? There's no need for all that. But because they're already cylindrical, this is going to add gravity. I get a hole put in the bottom of them, right? So I put a hole through the bottom and we hook some type of disconnect, whether it be a quick connect or whatever. All right. For the hot water one, there'll be a hole like 2 inches from the bottom cut and a hole, a few inches from the top cut. And that's where I'll have one of those copper coils where I can just go out and stoke a fire and then that'll circulate the water and that'll be the hot water one. So first I'd have from my uphill reservoir, because of course wherever I'm trying to go I'm going to have to ram pump up the hill. So ram pumping the water up the hill to say maybe one of those big propane tanks, which would be just the cold water, and I'd have it tilted at some kind of an angle. It doesn't have to be standing straight up and down; just has to give it some pressure. That'd go over, and I'd have to have a disconnect. That way, I could fill the hot water tank up, turn it off, and that way, once that water's done, I could just go up there, put the fire out, whatever, and refill the water. And then I'd have to have, so that cold water I'd have to come down to the sink. Um, it would be, because I don't know enough about plumbing, I would have hot water coming down two ways, and the only two places to get hot water in the house would be the showers. There would be like a rinse your hands and get water type sink, but it would just be the cold water coming down. And then I would have another tank all by itself for the toilet. And that would just be cold water. It'd have a disconnect right there. It'd fill the back of the toilet. You'd do your business. You'd flush it. It would go down to where I have a septic tank. Now, keep in mind, I'm trying to do this all on a hillside. And so you might be wondering, like, well, what happened if the septic tank busts? Well, I do have an idea for that, because keep in mind, on the minimum scale, just for conversational purposes, my hillside was 200 foot high by 500 foot wide. And I'm just going to use the right hand side for this. I'm coming off the right hand side 100 feet and going up like 150, maybe 120. And that'll be where I start my dig in to live. And then off to the side is where my, like downhill a little bit, is where I'll set up a septic tank. And from where that is in the ground, I'm gonna I'm gonna make like a trail, because honestly, if it busts, it's gonna bust and flow right down the hill. It's not gonna shoot sideways across the hill. It's gonna bust and go down the hill. So I'll have a bunch of stones just sitting, like we'll say 4 or 5 wide by however many feet, all the way down. You know what I mean? And the goal of them stones would be to stop the flow of the waste. And after a while, our waste is only going to be natural, because the goal is to cut out all processed foods and just grow our own veggies. I'm going to try to do a mixture of canning, drying, and even like rotational growing, where I start half the crop at the normal time and then start the other half at a little bit later date. And I'm not going to be a full-on farm, because keep in mind, the only place I'm growing fruit and vegetables is my hillside. So when I said for conversational purposes 500 feet, so underneath my home, I'm going to have about 100 feet or so, 150, 120 feet below the opening of my home, plus that. But over to the other side is only going to be like 400 feet by 200 feet. So my goal is to do like a terrace style or step style, however you want to call it. Also, up above the home is where I'll have chickens and rabbits, their grazing area. I do intend on being able every night to bring my chickens and my rabbits underground into their own coop area, into their own holding area, and then during the day I let them out with my guard dogs to watch them, and I'll have each part of this area I'll be having to reseed on a regular basis, but that's okay. Microgreens are good. I can plant I can just throw different kinds of seeds out there at different intervals, bring the rabbits up in floating cages, and then bring the floating cage over to the docking door, let them go back down into their pen, close the pens, and then bring the chickens back in. And then, like, if there's no rain, I can use some of the water that I've pumped to kind of hose the poop over the hillside as the fertilizer. But the rain should do that for me. You know what I mean? So yeah, that whole like 100 foot, like coming in off the side 100 feet, that whole 100 by 120, that's going to be like my usage land. Like, where I'll be able to park some vehicles and build some type of shed for the equipment, or maybe just put a storage unit. You know what I mean? Or not a storage unit, a shipping container. Now, if everything goes well and things go successful for me, I did have the intention on digging out my home and placing storage containers in there, and then putting the hillside back around it, just tamping it in. But I think once I get started and I get it all finished, and the main thing is the floor, the livable floor. And I have such a good idea that, like, after I split my logs in half, I'm going to plane a side on each of the log and hopefully have about 2 to 3 inches of connectable, like every log will have 2 to 3 inches, and then I can just sand the whole floor nice and smooth. You know what I mean? And maybe seal it with some type of oil and put a couple of throw rugs down, and then that'll be a good living situation. Plus, we'll have our own bedroom, Honey and I, and the fireplace will physically be between our bedrooms. So, all in all, I've got a really good idea. I'm right now building up everything I can as far as hand tools and stuff like that. Honey's downstairs checking out the tent, which is going to be our first living quarters until I start digging. And then once I start digging, our first in cut will be our temporary shelter. You know what I mean? And then as I dig into the hillside, as long as it stays safe, we're golden. If it collapses, I got another idea. If I'm not able to dig into the ground completely because the ground just isn't safe enough, that's when I'll divert my idea, do a partial in-ground, and then just bust my ass to get my storage units or shipping containers. And if I get shipping containers, I only need a 20 by 20 for the chicken coop, and then for the chicken rabbit coop, and then I would just need probably I'd say 20 by 20, I'm kind of dumb. But a 20-foot long one and a couple of 10-foot long ones to be the bedroom. I think that would be pretty good. Like main living quarter, 20 foot, and then two. It'll all come together. I'm going to make this happen.